What has torture, bondage, pain demons from hell, and the fiercest evil bitch queen in film to date? No, it's not Brunch at Kevin Spacey's house, it's Clive Barker's 1987 masterpiece, Hellraiser. Happy New Year, Gore whores! Welcome back to another fun-filled episode of All the Gory Details. I'm your host, the Thor of Gore, Kieran Odinson, and this week we're looking at 80s tortury splatterfest Hellraiser, so if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, watch it first and come back for some bondage demon fun times. Based on his 1986 novella The Hellbound Heart, Hellraiser was written and directed by eminent gay horror writer Clive Barker. It follows the story of the Lament configuration, or in layman's terms, the Rubik's Cube from Hell, which summons pain demons known as the Cenobites. We open the film with Frank Cotton, a man who's rooted his way around the world and done every possible drug off a hooker's ass, and has run out of ways to get his rocks off. Hearing tell of the puzzle box and the sensual delights it holds, he tracks it down and solves it, which doesn't end well for poor Frankie, who gets torn to shreds by the Cenobites. We cut to Frank's brother Larry, who has moved into his old abandoned childhood house with his wife Julia, who we discover has been having an affair with Frank, who has introduced her to all kinds of kink. Tits! And now she's been brought crashing back down to the vanilla world of her husband. Now let's all just take a moment to appreciate Julia, who is working all kinds of 80s fierceness. She's got big hair, big earrings, big shoulder pads, and she is painted for the gods! She is severe up in here! I know she's supposed to be a femme fatale evil bitch, but she's just won over my big gay heart. She's like a real-life Disney villainess, and I love her! After Larry takes a chunk out of himself trying to move a mattress, some of his blood spills onto the attic floor, partially reviving the corpse of his brother. The bloodied, sinewy skeleton of Frank appears to Julia, pleading her to bring him more blood to restore him. Clearly keen for some D, to get a kinky lover back to normal, she starts trawling random men in bars, dressing up as a gay Bob Dylan. I'm guessing that's a very niche kink. She lures these poor balding suckers home to the attic, where instead of getting a bit of booby, they get a hammer to the face, and Frank feeds on their corpses, reviving himself bit by bit, adding more flesh to his bones. Meanwhile, Larry's daughter Kirsty senses something is up with Julia, and follows her home after spying Julia bringing home another unsuspecting John back for a good hammering. She discovers Uncle Frank having his latest man snack and escapes with the puzzle box, ending up in hospital where her curiosity causes her to solve it, and thus summons the Cenobites. The lead Cenobite, known by fans as Pinhead, explains to her that they are priests who pray at the altar of sensation. No longer being able to tell the difference between pleasure and pain, they push the senses to the extremes, usually at the expense of the poor souls who have solved the puzzle box in question. They try to take Kirsty with them, but she talks her way out of it, explaining that Frank has escaped them, and that she will bring Frank to them in exchange for her freedom. Meanwhile, Julia and Uncle Frank have disposed of Larry, and Frank wears Larry's skin. After attempting and subsequently failing to crack onto his niece, Frank goes to stab Kirsty and inadvertently sticks it to Julia, this time in a not-so-fun way. Or maybe it is. She seems to be into all kinds of kink. Maybe seppuku's her new thing. Frankly, Frank doesn't really seem to give two shits about Julia.
Nothing personal, babe.
So he drains the blood and chases Kirsty up into the attic, where the Cenobites rock up and rip him to shreds with chains and hooks. Setting their sights on Kirsty, she puts the puzzle box back together, sending them all back to hell. Kirsty throws the box into a fire, where a wacky vagabond man shows up, picks it up and turns into a motherfucking dragon and flies off with it, returning it to the shady merchant from the beginning of the film. In 1987, Hellraiser was a unique and groundbreaking film, in a world full of slasher movies where the stalking silent killer had become ubiquitous. Barker himself stated that he wanted to see a villain that could speak and describe its motivations. Hellraiser introduced horror audiences to the Cenobites and launched a whole new franchise, ensuring Doug Bradley's status as a horror icon, and continued the tradition of spawning sequels of much lesser quality. It's interesting to observe the Cenobites in relation to the whole story of the film. Even though they're the obvious big bad, otherworldly demons, it's the actions of the humans in the film that are the truly villainous part. The shady merchant at the start who peddles the box to unsuspecting customers, and our lead antagonists of Frank and Julia who resort to murder to get what they desire most. The Cenobites merely do their jobs. The box is solved, they're summoned, they do what they're supposed to do. Fun fact, the studio didn't like Barker's original title, The Hellbound Heart, as it sounded too much like a romance novel. Clive offered up sadomasochists from beyond the grave, but the studio balked at that one too, so he offered it up to members of the crew for suggestions. One prim and proper 60-something-year-old lady came up with the most inventive option: what a woman will do for a good fuck. When it comes to special effects, personally I'm of the school of thought that when something can be done with practical effects, it should be. When effects and gore are done in camera, they just seem more visceral. They give more for the actors to work with, and generally hold up better with age. The practical effects in Hellraiser are absolutely stunning and hold up spectacularly for a movie that's almost 30 years old. Hellraiser is a fantastic and unique horror movie, and is up there as one of my favourite horror movies of all time. It's got everything you could want in a movie: Faustian themes, one fierce queen, a plucky final girl, man candy, supernatural demons from hell, gore galore, and a little bit of leather and kink thrown in for good measure. Well, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode where I take a look at Hellraiser's sequel, Hellbound. If you missed last week's puntastic look at the movie Zombievers, click here. And if you want to subscribe to all the gory details, you can do so by clicking here. Thanks for watching Gore Whores. See you next time.